Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be sowing some banana seeds. The idea is I'm wanting to make a jungle themed garden in my back garden, and I want to grow a lot of the plants from seed just to save cost, and also it's a bit more rewarding growing a plant from seed instead of buying it as a young plant. So there's three different types of bananas I'm going to be growing. I'll just give you a quick show of the kind of difference in the size of seeds. There's quite a massive difference. So we've got this one here, you can see they're really quite small seeds, whereas compared with these ones here, really quite large seeds. So there's quite a difference in seed size at least. So the two hardy bananas I've got is Musa yunnanensis and also Musa sikkimensis as well. So I'll start off with the Musa yunnanensis. This one is a more recently discovered species. Basically it's a banana from China. It's from the Yunnan province. It grows high in the mountains, so it's a hardy banana. It was originally thought of as another species, so it has only recently been described as its own species. But it comes up from the Yunnan province in China, where it gets quite cold and they can get frost during the winter, so it should be hardy in my garden. When it comes to frost tolerance, the leaves can't take a huge amount of frost, so I expect the leaves to die every year, and the stem can't take a lot of frost either, so unless I protect the stem and insulate it, it'll be killed right down to the root level each year. But the roots are quite hardy. If I insulate it well with mulch, it should be able to take about -10 or so. So it's quite hardy at the root level, but my intention is to keep the stems shielded, and that way it should survive a bit better. So what I've done with all these banana seeds is I've soaked them overnight in water, and now I'm just going to propagate them up into a heated propagator to get them to germinate. Now I could put them in compost, but I find you get a slightly better germination rate if you start them off on a piece of tissue, a damp piece of tissue sealed up in a container on a heated propagator. The reason for that is I can make sure that this is sterile. I can also keep an eye on all the seeds. If they start to get any mold or anything, I can deal with that, and it's also easier for me to keep an eye on the moisture levels and make sure they're not getting too wet or too dry. So I start a lot of my harder to grow seeds on this, or my more expensive larger seeds in this method. If they're very cheap seeds, or if I had loads of them, I just probably grow them in seed and cutting compost. So the first one I'm going to grow is, as I say, the Musa yunnanensis. The seeds in these ones are the smallest out of all the bananas I've got. Also, a lot of these seeds were floating, so I'm not sure how many of them are viable. But you can see the seeds there, and the seeds in all the banana plants, they look pretty similar out of these three species anyway. And I'll just compare that with the Abyssinian banana, which is the one with the giant seeds, so you can get an idea of the size difference. This Abyssinian banana is actually a giant seed variety, so they're not normally quite this big, but they are often bigger than the yunnanensis ones. So I'm just going to scatter them evenly over the surface here. Make sure that they're not too close to each other, in case they because if one goes mouldy, then the mold can easily spread to the next one. So I just want a little bit of separation. I'll be doing this with all the banana seeds as well. Similar technique. Once they're all potted up into these little containers, I'll seal them up with either a lid or cling film, and then I'll put them in my heated propagator. I'm aiming for about 25-30 degrees, something like that. These bananas, although most bananas are tropical, these are subtropical bananas, so the very high temperatures are not quite as important, but I still want to keep it in a subtropical condition, so 25-30 degrees as opposed to 30 degrees. So that's the first one anyway, so I'll get that sealed up and I'll go on to the next. So this next one is Musa sikkimensis. This is one from India, but again it's from the Himalayan region, so it's high altitude, cool conditions, so it should do well in our climate. All of these bananas are from high altitude areas, so the last one I'll be talking about is the Abyssinian one. The Abyssinian one isn't hardy to frost, but it grows in high altitude areas, so the cooler summer temperatures shouldn't be a problem for it. I'm in North Scotland, and my temperatures don't normally go much above 20 in the summer, so I need to have bananas that can tolerate the cooler temperatures but also the frost. So with this Musa, it's very similar to the yunnanensis. I'm probably going to struggle to tell the difference once they germinate. They both grow about 5 meters tall. They both have very similar leaves and very similar growth habits. This one should be slightly more hardy than the yunnanensis, but there's not a huge amount of difference between this and the yunnanensis species. So we'll see how it does. The seeds are slightly bigger, so it should have a slightly faster head start, hopefully. And I don't think as many of these were floating when I put them in the water, so they should do a little bit better. I have noticed with all the bananas though, the seeds are still quite hard and shriveled up, so they don't seem to have absorbed much water. What I might have to do is something that you can do on seeds that don't absorb water readily, and that is just to damage the seed coat slightly. So I'll show you on the Abyssinian one because it's easier to sow on a larger seed. But basically you damage the seed coat. So I could get either a file and file down the seed coat, or a knife and just make a little nick in it. That way the water can get in a little bit faster and it should germinate quicker. So I'll probably do that maybe on 2 of these Abyssinian ones, see if it makes a difference. The larger the seed, the thicker the seed coat, the more you're likely going to have problems with that. So I'll do it on a couple of these, see if it makes a difference. But I'm generally going to avoid that because I don't want to damage the seed. But as I say, it is a good method. Sweet peas are a good example of a plant that often benefits from that. So that's the 2 hardy ones now in their propagation trays. These, as I say, both grow about 5 meters. Should hopefully be able to keep the stems on these, and these will be sitting in the ground year round. I just need to mulch the roots to make sure I don't get frost. So the last one I'm going to be propagating is probably a much more well-known one. It's the Abyssinian banana, and this is the Latin name. So it's the Ensete ventricosum, and this is a large seed variety. So it's basically very similar to the normal Abyssinian banana, but the seeds are just much larger. This one. This can grow much taller. This can grow to about 12 or 16 meters in total height. A lot of that height though is the leaves. The stem probably only grows to 3 or 4 meters in height, but it's a really big, massive plant. This banana is actually a lot more common here in the UK than the other two. The other two, they are hardier, but this one is often grown as a bedding plant, so people sow them quite early in the year. I'm sowing these plants in January to give them a good head start. Plants have very rapid growth, so although they can't survive the frost and they won't survive to the next year, because they grow so quickly they can give some great foliage in the garden, and it's just treated as a bedding plant. But some people who do have a bit more storage space, what you can do is you can dig this up at the end of the year, take it into a cellar or a heated conservatory or greenhouse, somewhere that's frost free but close to freezing, and you can just kind of keep it in suspended animation. Cut all the leaves off, remove most of the roots, just have the main stem and the roots and tuber at the base, and you can keep this banana going till next year, and then you can get really quite large plants. But the limit with this is that the Abyssinian bananas get so big that eventually they're too big to dig up and move. So people normally do it only for 1 or 2 years, because after that it gets too large to move, especially as the Abyssinian bananas are really fast growing plants which have really fat stems, and they get to a huge size eventually. So I think these Abyssinian ones, although they're not going to be perennial for me, I'm going to try and keep them at least one winter if I can. And because I've got so many here, if I get quite a few plants, I'm going to leave 1 or 2 in the garden, mulch them really well, and just see if there's a chance that they might survive. If I can keep the roots well insulated, and if the soil doesn't get too wet, there's a chance that I might be able to overwinter these. But I'm not expecting these to survive. Most of these plants I'll probably just overwinter inside in a conservatory, or I'll take it to my parents' polytunnel and overwinter it there in the winter. So I find the Abyssinian banana plant quite a bit more interesting, partly because it's so fast growing, but also because of its use in the world. So the Abyssinian banana is quite a good stable food source for Ethiopians. In Ethiopia, certainly traditionally, people would grow a lot of these bananas and they eat the stem and the roots at the base. There's quite a starchy material at the bottom of the trunk, and they would grow this for 3 or 4 years into a large tree, and then they can cut that down and eat it. So that's interesting to know. Maybe I'll try eating it, I'm not sure. I need to look if there's a certain way of processing it. A lot of more tropical plants need a certain way of being processed that isn't so easy than just simply boiling it. But I'll have a look anyway. Might be an option of eating the stem of this when it comes to the end of the season. And this will be the fastest growing, and because the seeds are so big, this should really have a good head start. So there's lots of energy stored in the seeds. The first leaves on these are already going to be quite large, so this will get a really quick head start, and by the end of summer this should be my largest banana. Even though it's not quite as tolerant of the colder temperatures, it should make up for that with the head start that it should get, and just being a very vigorous banana in general. So that'll be quite an interesting one to see. The other two, as I say, they aren't as fast growing. Even though these two don't get as big eventually, these will get bigger because these will survive year after year, whereas this one is a bit more tropical, so I won't be able to survive the winter. So as I say, I'm going to now cover these, seal them up, make sure they've got plenty of moisture. I want to keep just a very thin layer of water in here, just enough that it keeps them damp. I want them covered so the humidity is 100% and they can absorb all the moisture, but I don't want them sitting in water because they could rot, which is why I've got the tissue paper here. I'm going to put them in the heated propagator, and then I'll see you in the next part of the video where hopefully we're getting some germination. I don't know how old these seeds are. I've only just received them in the post, but they don't look particularly fresh, so I don't know how good the germination is going to be. I'm hoping for a decent germination rate, but looking at these seeds and they're quite dry and old, I'm worried that there might not be a great germination success. But we'll see at the end of the video, and we'll see how they do. So it's now been 3 weeks, and unfortunately there's been no germination yet. Banana seeds can take a very long time to germinate. Most of them start germinating after 2 or 3 weeks, but some seeds can take up to 6 months to germinate. And this method is quite intensive, so what I have to do with this is check it every day to see if any are germinating. Because there's no soil, once they germinate, they have to be put into soil within a day or two of germination. Otherwise the roots are going to be out in the open, or they're going to start getting stuck into the tissue that I've got under here. And the other issue with this is it's a lot more difficult to manage mold. So with these I have to replace the tissue and rinse the seeds every week or two, and just to make sure they don't get too much mold growth. I've done that once already. I've already rinsed them in a weak bleach solution, and also changed the tissue. But the problem is that it's starting to happen again. I'm going to have to do this every week, and it's going to be quite intensive. And I've got lots of other seeds that I need to germinate, so I need to make life a bit easier for me. I'm going to put these into compost now. So I'll show you how they look now. This is the worst looking one, the sikkimensis. As you can see, there's quite a bit of mold starting to grow on some of these. It's only been a week since I last rinsed them, but the mold's starting to appear on them. The yunnanensis isn't too bad at all. A little bit of something maybe, but they're pretty much fine. As I say, there's no sign of any germination. There hasn't really been much change at all. I've had it in the incubator warm during probably about 30 degrees during the day, quite warm, and about 20 at night, just trying to get the alternating temperatures to help them to germinate. And this is the Ensete ventricosum, and again, there's no change with that. I have actually got a random Trachycarpus in there. I just wanted to see if it would germinate without a cold treatment, because the rest of them are having a cold treatment. But as you can see, there's no germination. When the germination does occur, it should come out of these that section there. You can see this kind of like a hollow section on the seed. That's where the roots and shoots should appear from. So what I'm going to do now is get these rinsed in a bleach solution, and I'll come back in a few minutes time, and I'll start planting them up into some fresh compost. So I've now rinsed the seeds in a weak solution of bleach, and what I'm going to be doing is putting them into a multi-purpose compost. This one is actually very low nutrients, so it's almost like a seed and cutting compost. I don't want a very nutrient-rich compost yet, because when the new roots come out, they're very sensitive, and the chemicals in the fertilizer can easily damage the roots. But when it's a mature plant, high feed compost is probably best for bananas, because they like lots of feed. So with this, I'm going to be keeping it damp and trying to keep it in the propagator as well. Just the same routine as having the propagator on during the day, off at night, have that alternating temperature. But when it comes to planting the banana seeds, they need to be planted in a particular way. So when it comes to bananas, they have slightly different germination to most plants. So with most plants, the seeds are similar in that you have a whole little section where the embryo comes out of, where it basically sends a root down and a shoot up. And depending on the variety of plant, it'll either the seed will stay in position and the shoot will just grow up and the root will just grow down. A bit like my time lapse that I did years ago. I'll put a link in now so you can watch that time lapse of a seed germinating. On the other option that most plants do is the seed actually has the shoot inside it, and it comes up and it gets pushed out of the soil. The root goes down, it comes out of the soil, and then either the seed is left on the top of the plant if it's a monocot like an allium or an onion, something like that, or chives, or if it's something like a bean. So some of the beans, they have the seed just kind of connected on the side of the plant. It just depends on the plant, but with it's quite different with bananas. Bananas, basically, you actually want the little hole to be upwards, which for most plants you want it down on the side. And what happens is a little shoot comes up, and the shoot keeps growing up, and that becomes the leaves. And from the base of the shoot, it grows down and sideways, little roots. So it's a little bit different to most. So that's why it needs to be planted this way up. It also needs to be not too deep as well, but just about twice the depth of the seed, something like that. Once it starts growing, it can easily push through the compost, get its shoot above ground, but its roots are also buried enough that they can grow along and then down into the compost. So I'm just going to make a slight hollow in each of these cells, and then I'm just going to place the seed just gently into the compost with that little marking on the facing upwards. and then I'm going to just gently cover it with compost, and then just I'm going to spray the surface of this just to make sure it's nice and damp and there's plenty of moisture. The compost is already damp, but it probably just needs a bit of extra dampness just to make sure it does germinate well. The advantage of using the compost instead of the other method is that mould doesn't tend to be such a big issue in this. There can be an issue of rot, which is a bit more precarious with this system, but as long as you don't get the compost too wet, this is quite an easy way to germinate most seeds, and it's a method that most people use to germinate seeds. So that's all the seeds now sown. Now, as I said, it can take up to 6 months for these seeds to germinate. It's really a waiting game with banana seeds. They're not the easiest of things to germinate, so I'm hoping some might germinate soon. It's been 3 weeks. Normally it's 2 to 3 weeks for the first ones to start germinating, but it really depends on the variety. So I would hope to see something in the next month or so, but if I'm unlucky it could be several months, or if the seeds are old and dried up, I might not get anything. But I'll see you at the end of the video and see what the results are. So it's been now almost a month in total. It's only been about a week since my last update, so it's been about 4 weeks. I planted these on the 7th of January and it's now the 4th of February, so just exactly 1 month and we have our first germination. As you can see, the ones at the back, there's no sign of germination yet. The Ensete, nothing, and the yunnanensis ones were the ones I was actually a little bit worried about because a lot of them floated and they're much smaller seeds, so nothing on them. But we do have germination on the sikkimensis. So it's really not a lot to see, but you can just see there's a tiny little shoot starting to come up there. So what I'm going to do is now put this into an individual pot. I've got lots of Musa sikkimensis seeds in here, and I want to get them out as soon as they start germinating, because if the roots grow into each other and I try and separate them, the roots are very fragile on banana, they're going to easily snap. I don't want to damage them, I want to cause as little damage as possible. So I'm going to carefully tease this out of the soil. I'm just going to pot it up into a 9cm pot, just in some multi-purpose compost. And we'll see what it looks like. The seeds aren't huge on this one, but they're in between the Abyssinian banana and the yunnanensis one. So I'm just going to be very careful, try not to damage it. Just going to scoop it up from underneath. Okay, it's going to be incredibly fragile at this stage, and I'll just quickly show you how it looks. It looks like the roots are out, because this was actually upside down and I flipped it over a couple of days ago because I must have accidentally planted this one upside down. I think this longer section here going to the left is actually the roots, and this bit going up is actually the shoot. So I'm going to try and plant it that kind of orientation. Because these seeds are so small, when I was putting them in originally, some of them did flip over unfortunately, so that's why this one's kind of growing slightly differently. So I'm just going to put this in the soil, just being very careful not to damage it. And then just going to cover it up slightly. So this isn't going to be in the propagator, this one. The rest are going to stay in the propagator with around 20 degrees at night, 30 degrees during the day. The alternating temperature helps banana seeds germinate. What happens in the wild is there might be a clearing in the forest. The tropical sun will beat down on the ground or get really hot during the day. But because they're subtropical banana trees, it'll cool down to around 20 degrees at night. So they need that big variation in temperature if you can give it. So this is now going to go into my grow box where it's still nice and warm, but it's going to have some light, and that should start growing away. I think I'm going to finish the video here. The video is getting quite long now, and I don't want it to be over half an hour. So what I'm going to do is finish it here, and I'll make a second video, and that will just show you all the other plants once they started to grow. I'm not sure what the germination rate is going to be like. Like I said earlier in the video, they can be a bit touch and go if these seeds are old, and because it takes a long time for banana seeds to germinate. But hopefully in the next update I'll be showing you my Musa basjoo banana, which is actually a plant, not from seed, and I'll also be showing you all of the seedlings that are starting to germinate on these. The next update for these actual seeds will probably be in a few months' time, because I expect from now on we'll just get 1 or 2 germinating every week, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly they grow. As I said before, I'm expecting the Ensete ventricosum, or the Abyssinian banana, to grow the fastest once it gets going, but it'll just be interesting to see which ones germinate fastest. At the moment, Musa sikkimensis has been the first to germinate, so I'm going to be checking this one every day because I'm expecting several more to start popping up soon. The other bananas, no sign of germination yet, but we'll see what happens. So that's all for this video, and I'll see you guys in a few months' time, and we'll see what the germination rate was like, and hopefully see how fast this one grows, and hopefully I haven't damaged the roots or anything with transplanting.